Okay, so welcome. This presentation we're going to talk about, it's mostly going to be about debugging animations and runtime performance within your browser. I specifically kind of tie it into the Sci-Fi Network just because that's like a sexy website that I've worked on and it's pretty cool. My name is Mike Herschel. I'm a front-end developer at Lullabot. I've been at Lullabot for a little over a year. It's kind of fun. I want to plug Florida Drupal Camp because Florida Drupal Camp is coming up. And, you know, we're not too far away, 7-ish hours. It's going to come up in February, maybe March. Drupal 8 hopefully will be out by then, right? Yeah. And, yeah. So this is how we're going to do this. We're going to do a walkthrough. I'm going to do a walkthrough of the website just so I can kind of explain the issues to you, explain the problem that we're going to be solving. We're going to go through some slides and talk about how the browsers actually render websites and kind of the theory behind it. We're going to go into front-end profiling tools, which is basically Chrome DevTools. I'm going to show you some like really cool things in there that you probably don't know. And then like some real-world application stuff, which kind of ties into number 5. Oh, so I have a beer in the corner. So if you see that beer, that means I'm passionate about that subject in general, and I will talk about this over beers with you and go. It's pretty cool. So let me bring up the website right here. All right. So this is it right here. So as you go down, you see a lot of scroll effects happening, and we're going to get into that, and we're going to talk about how some of these work. But the main thing I want to kind of impart to you, like at the start, is that any way you look at this website, it's going to be like a really heavy website. You have many megabytes of images in here. You have a lot of stuff moving around. If you look at that top section with the latest episodes, you can see the logos and info kind of move around independently. At the same time, the what do you call it? Overlay over the image fades and turns gray. And at that point, you're going to see the main heroes here. You can see the heroes kind of fade out independently of another. It's bound to the scroll, so if I scroll down, I scroll up. The hero section will support anywhere between 1 and 3 hero units. The section below the hero we call the tile feed. It can fit various different types of tiles. It's responsive, so as I zoom out, you can see it'll reconfigure itself to like 4 tiles, and as I responsive my butt in here, you can see it goes down to 1 or 2 tiles. One thing that you're going to notice here, when we go down to a certain level here, we're losing these scroll animations, and that's kind of on purpose, and that's because mobile browsers don't handle scroll animations really well. As you scroll within a mobile browser, it actually pauses any type of animation, so this effect becomes really janky. So the way that we handle that is we have a breakpoint set at 650 pixels, where if anything smaller than that, we kind of assume that it's mobile and that it's going to exhibit this behavior. But it also does JavaScript UA detection in case you have like the big ass iPad that's coming out, we thought Apple might make a big ass iPad, and yes, they are. So what else? I have my little cheat sheet here to make sure I don't miss anything. So within the shows page, we have obviously various different shows. Within each of the micro sites, it's kind of the same layout. You have, the icons, your own individual navigation. There's a style tag that's injected that'll put in like the custom colors and all that type of stuff. I don't know. It's kind of, I don't want to call it basic, but it's pretty cool. So this is the schedule page. We have this Live Now section up here. I'm just kind of going everything. That's I think as good as much as I want to show you about the website. You guys should check it out. It's kind of cool. It does all types of video stuff in it too. But now what we're going to get into is how browsers work. So the way that I'm dividing this section is we're going to talk about the DOM, the document object model, the CSS object model, render tree layout, painting, and then compositing, which is putting everything together. So the document object model is just like the DOM, the HTML basically that you get down from the server. This is kind of what you see within Chrome developer tools and any other developer tools. The CSS object model is very, very similar, where it's a representation of your site CSS. So your browser will start with the most generic rule, which is, you know, the body tag, and cascade down to more specific rules. The DOM and the CSS object model combine to form the render tree. So the render tree contains the nodes that are required to render the page. So if you display none something and it removes that, this is not going to be in your render tree. Something that's within DevTools, within the timeline tab, you'll see this as the layout event. As we're going to go into the timeline tab of DevTools and we're going to look at some of the events. So this will show up as the layout event. And one of the reasons that this is important, because as you add and remove classes dynamically through JavaScript, you can force relayouts, which is generally a bad thing unless you're doing it intentionally. And if you add like a CSS class to the body tag and it forces a relayout, it's going to re-affect everything under that node, which is basically the whole DOM. If you do it on a branch of that, it works its way down. It doesn't have to work as hard. So what can cause layout invalidation? I guess I kind of talked about some of this stuff. Updating your DOM nodes. If you're adjusting the height, width, margins, paddings, anything that moves stuff around relative to another, that'll cause a layout invalidation. JavaScript's offsets, where it calculates its position relative to something else, that can cause a layout invalidation. I see that a lot of times with advertisements, which annoys the shit out of me, where like they'll have some type of tracking stuff in there where you move your mouse and they might be doing some type of heat map, and they're doing these offsets, and these offsets are just slowing down your website, you know, and that's kind of annoying. Layout thrashing. Layout thrashing is when you read and then you write. So like I read, I get an offset and then I write the offset and then I do it over and over again. There's kind of a simple fix to this. If you combine all your reads and writes together, your browser will put that into one read operation and one write operation. And this is obviously like a very simplified, I don't know, setup right here. But that's something to keep in mind when you're writing any type of JavaScript that's doing offsets and reading offsets. You want to combine everything together. And I always joke about my mom's computer. It's running Windows XP. You know, it's old as shit. I turned the Chrome icon into a blue E so she learns to use Chrome. So it can... So she's using like a modern browser, right? But it's still kind of slow. So like whenever I'm writing this stuff, I think of my poor old mother. So I want, yeah. So what doesn't cause layouts? So this is like my, I have favorite slides in here. So this is the second to favorite slides. Transformers, right? Fucking 80s. I used to have Transformers, Optimus Prime. And like the old stuff, not the new crappy stuff. So CSS transforms, they're a new I say new, they're a CSS3 specification. When you use CSS transforms, it doesn't affect the items around it, you know, and so you can move this stuff and it's not causing relayouts, it's not causing, paints in many situations, and you can do a lot with this. You can move stuff side to side, up and down, scale it in and out. You can skew it, you can rotate it, all this cool stuff. You can do 3D transforms where it flips around, and cool stuff like that. All of that type of stuff. If you're animating something, you generally want to stick to transforms. And one of my pet peeves, the whole stereotype parallax website, and I can name names, so I'm not going to name names, where you start scrolling, and then you see and as you're scrolling, there's this background images struggling to go up at your rate of scroll. And so the reason that this is happening is because they're animating the wrong property. Typically, they animate the background position property, the background position of the background image. That's a horrible way to do things. A better way to do things, and we can talk about this, you'll see this a little bit later, is to put that image directly within the DOM, animate it through transforms. And then you can use overflow hiddens and cool stuff like that to kind of make sure it fits properly, and does all the same stuff. When you are going to transform something, there's a couple CSS properties that you can use to promote these items to its own layer. And so has everybody here used Photoshop or something similar where you have layers of graphics and you can drag and layer around on top of another one, and it just works pretty good? It's almost like a very similar concept where if I have one Photoshop layer and I want to move this picture of a bird from here to there, I have to cut it out and move it over and paint really shittily underneath. And but if you have a layer, you can just move it, right? So you can promote elements into their own layers by using these properties. So the first property is will change. Will change is a new property. It's the semantic property. It's the correct property to use, except for not all browsers support it. Safari, at least under Yosemite, did not support it. I don't know about whatever the new one is, if that supports it. I haven't checked. But the more traditional way to do it is to use backface visibility hidden. Backface visibility is like a CSS transform property. The default value is visible. I'm going to show this later as I kind of screw around with it. But when you set it to hidden, it automatically promotes it to its own layer. There's a couple other ways that you might see. You might see translate Z or translate 3D Z or something 0. If you see something like that and you don't know what the hell they're doing, they're promoting it to its own layer so they can move it around. So that's basically doing the layout right there, right? And promoting things to their own layer. So the next thing is my favorite slide. Bob Ross. Painting, right? Because freaking happy little trees. So painting is the point where you actually write the pixels to the layers. So if you change a paint-only property like background image, text color, opacity, shadows, it doesn't affect the layout of the page, but it does do a paint. So that's something to keep in mind. After all the painting is done, so all right, before I jump ahead here, painting is a very expensive operation to do on your computer. Painting is done on your computer's CPU as opposed to GPU. So the GPU is the graphics processing unit, or something like that. Things that are able to run on that typically run a lot faster than on your central processing unit, which is kind of a more generalized processor, so it runs slower, I'm assuming. And so anything that you can offload to the GPU, you can do that. So the next slide is compositing. Compositing is when you combine the layers and actually throw them up on the screen. So compositing is done on the GPU. So that's why it's a very inexpensive operation. So when we go into the timeline tab and we're seeing all these frame rates, and you're looking at these frame rates and you're going to see, what the hell, why are these frame rates really slow? You look and you're seeing painting, painting, painting. All right, well, why the hell is it painting so much? That's the expensive operation. If you see a whole bunch of compositing and you don't see much painting, you're doing something right. So, yeah. So you can see an idea of layers here. This is like a video, and you can see as my mouse magically moves around, you can see kind of layers show up. And I'm going to show you, I'll probably be able to do this in the demo. Do I have an hour or 45 minutes for this session? What time does this end? Let me know. All right, cool. Got another half an hour, we're good. So, stepping away from this. Avoid layout invalidation. Don't do like crazy amounts of offsets, crazy amounts of reads, crazy amounts of offsets, crazy amounts of read. Understand what you're doing. And also avoid repaints. In a perfect world, your website should be painted once, but that's like, and I say a perfect world, that's like a standard website that doesn't have any moving cool crap, you know? But you want to repaint it as little as possible. All right, now we get to the cool part. So, DevTools. Just to get an idea here as I'm pulling this up. Who here uses DevTools? Sweet. Who here is a front-end developer? Who here is a back-end developer? Who here is a WordPress developer? A couple, that's cool. I just want to know my audience. All right. So for those of you that don't know, developer tools are included in every major browser, even Internet Explorer. And you can, it's really cool because you can get in and you can kind of see what makes your website tick. And I think this is like almost like very open source way that even like the internet, how open it is, that any browser, I can go to my mom's computer and have access to these powerful developer tools. I think that's so cool. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of work my way across here. I'm going to work from the Elements tab, the Networks tab, Sources. The Timeline tab is my favorite. I'm going to ignore some of these tabs because I don't really use them. And we're going to go into some options on how to profile stuff and how to isolate some problems and figure out where stuff is coming from. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Elements tab, and some of this is going to be kind of basic, but I want to cover everything for those that might not be really familiar with it. So you can see where my mouse is in the bottom right here. I'm going to hit this little magnifying glass, and I can select stuff, right? So I can select the logo right here. So the logo, this is actually an SVG embedded into the site, so I can kind of see that, and I can start screwing around with stuff, right? I can screw around with my I can screw around with my CSS properties. I can delete stuff. I can use this to kind of troubleshoot and kind of almost kind of see what. Almost do my developing before I put it, you know, into my CSS or Sass files or whatever. Something that you can do is you can select text, and something I like to do that I'm kind of passionate about is and this is kind of an aside from everything. I like to make sure that my CSS or that my styling can accommodate whatever the hell the user is going to throw at it. When you give someone a content management system, you can almost be assured that they're going to try to put some data in there that's going to break your layout, right? And so I use DevTools to start screwing with stuff, right? So you can see that the show that's on right now is Hostel Part 2, but we have like shows that will come on that might have very long titles, you know, like Chupacabra versus the Alamo versus Crocodilian Alligator or some crap. So you can start editing this and throwing that out, right? Oh crap, I just clicked on something. Let me do that again. All right. So all right. So you can see that it's expanding, but what I'm doing right here is when your screen gets narrow enough, you can see that I have this little CSS ellipsis over here. I have a max width set on it, and then it'll automatically kind of make itself narrower so it won't overflow the logo. So like that's the type of stuff that you can get into DevTools and start breaking your layout and then finding a way to fix your layout, you know? So that's kind of cool. So a couple things that you might not know in here is you can drag and drop elements. So like say if I have, I don't know, this whole nav bar right here, and I want to see what it's going to look like below the footer, I can click and drag it. And it looks the same because I guess it's fixed positioned. But I can move the footer up to the top. And it's probably being hidden. So this is a really bad, yeah. Let's go ahead and maybe let's move this list item around right there. Did that go? There you go. So you can see I'm moving stuff around. So you can move stuff around. You can also copy and paste stuff, which is kind of cool. So I'm gonna select this list item within DevTools. I'm gonna hit Control-C to copy. I'm gonna select my parent unordered list. I'm gonna hit Control-V to paste. And you can see that breaks the layout pretty good. But you can kind of do stuff like this to approximate how your user is going to F you over, you know, and that's kind of useful. Another thing within DevTools is the Computed tab. So I can select an item right here, and you see I'm on this Computed tab right here. So it shows everything that's inherited if I select this little box right here, which is selected by default. I can uncheck that and show the styles that are explicitly set on this. I can filter up here, and I can filter by like color or something like this. I can also click up here and start typing in invalid stuff and see what'll happen, you know. And nothing happened there, but I could probably put in a number. That's kind of interesting. You can click on your CSS files right here, and it'll take you to the Sources tab. So right now you can see that the CSS is kind of minified. It's kind of ugly. You can hit this. Does everybody see where my mouse is at the bottom right here? I can hit this, and it'll make it pretty and take me right there. Kind of a cool thing. It does that in JavaScript too. That's something that'll change your life if you didn't know about it, and now you do. You can edit stuff directly in here. Like I can get rid of all my CSS and make the site pretty ugly. I kind of jumped around here. I need to be on the Elements tab. But anyway, that's the Elements tab, right? Let's look at the Network tab. Who here is familiar with the Network tab and kind of knows? Yeah. Network tab is maybe my second favorite tab. I need to make a list of like all my favorite things. Network tab would be up there. So as I reload the page right here, you're going to see a bunch of different things. You're going to see that the site is loading up here. You're going to see the next thing it loads are a bunch of CSS and JavaScript files. You're going to see this waterfall right down here. I don't know why it's really wide, probably because there's some ads and stuff coming up. Let me get back into that. Something that's kind of cool here, I'm going to reload one more time here. So something that's really interesting with this type of stuff is that it'll show you, like right here, it'll show you your HTTP requests. This is a crap load right here. This is such a bad example because we have a lot of advertisement stuff coming in. I generally try to keep everything, you want to, like depending on your website, maybe under 100, under 50. You can filter up here too. I like doing this on this one so I can filter by sci-fi. You can see that we only have 63 HTTP requests that are coming from our domain. So what that means is that there's a whole bunch of ad stuff that's like tracks your blood pressure and like what you're looking at and your political views and stuff as you go to this website. So and it kind of slows down some scroll interactions, which is kind of makes me mad. All right, let's look at some other stuff. So I can select each one of these items right here is an HTTP request. So in the current so HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and what that is that's the way that your server sends your data to your computer. So every time that your computer goes to a website and it gets the HTML. HTML has a bunch of links to a bunch of CSS files. Pulls those down. The CSS files have a bunch of links to background images. Pulls those down. JavaScripts load other JavaScripts, which load other JavaScripts, which load other JavaScripts. All your images, all this stuff coming down, each one of these is an HTTP request. And for every single one of these, your browser has to reach out to the server and do what's called a handshake. Is to say, hello, this is me, I want this, thank you, blah, blah, blah. And that's a really slow process. Most browsers can do 6 concurrently. So you're going to pull down 6 items concurrently. So you can see that if you have a whole bunch of HTTP requests, at that point, it's going to take more time to bring them down, right? And that can be a problem. So you really want to minimize those. And people typically minimize them by combining things together. They'll check that box within the Drupal performance tab to aggregate all your CSS files together. That helps out a whole bunch. The same thing with your JavaScript files. People will use what's called image sprites to combine all their images. And that's all really good stuff. There's a new version of HTTP coming out that's going to negate the need for that. I can't wait. It's going to be fantastic. It's already incorporated in major browsers, and the server softwares are rolling it out right now. So that's gonna be really useful. Something else that's kind of cool is you can see your HTTP headers here. So this is like the background metadata that goes back between your computer and the server as you're sending data back and forth. And what's really interesting here is that you can see, what's very important from a front-end performance standpoint is you can see, number one, if the stuff is cached. You can see any type of how long it's cached, why it's cached. And what's really important, you can see if it's compressed. So when you have a text file, which could be your original HTML document, your CSS file, your JavaScript files, your SVGs, anything else, you want to see that it says gzip right here. And what that will do is that'll decrease the size of that HTTP request by probably about an order of magnitude over the wire, like as it's coming down. So I can look at this CSS file right here. Let me just select it right here. Get out. So this one where my mouse is right here, you can see the original size is 388 kilobytes. Over the wire, as it was sent down, it was 66. So that's like a 5-fold increase right there. That's pretty cool. Something else that's really useful is you have a frame capture within new versions. So I'm going to hit Command R to reload. And you're going to see it's going to say recording frames right there. And now it's saying fetching frames. I'm going to drink. So what it's going to show right here is it's going to show what your web page looks like at 790 milliseconds, 1.3 seconds. All this looks pretty good right here, right? But what if you're on a slow connection? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a mobile view right here. You guys see where my mouse is? I'm going to hit this like little iPhone looking thing over here. And then I'm also going to hit this button over here to pull the dev tools to the side. There's a little drop down box right here, throttling. I'm going to select 3G, regular 3G, because that's what I had on the interstate all the way up. Freaking Verizon. And I'm gonna reload, and you're gonna see it's gonna take a lot longer. So this is really useful, especially for, situations where you expect people to be on 3G connections, which honestly in this day and age, hopefully they're not, but they probably are. This little camera button right here. You see where my mouse is? All right, it's going to say I'm fetching frames right now. So I got 20 minutes. I need to hurry. I'm gonna jump through some stuff because the cool stuff is still coming up. So at 7 seconds, all we have is this. It's pretty crappy, right? At 9 seconds, let's continue to go over. How do I scroll? So we're loading up that first view in like 20 seconds. How crappy is that? That's pretty bad, right? So there's a number of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that the main hero image is a responsive image where it loads different sizes based on your viewport. That's not prefetched, which is kind of, I think that's like, it should be a bug within Chrome. I don't know if it is. That's why the picture is one of the last things to load. And then the other things that take a long time to load is the font. It's using a custom font. So if it has to download the font, it's going to take a long time to render the text. A lot of times what people will do is they'll put their @font face items directly in the head tag of their HTML document so your browser can start downloading those font files as soon as possible. We should be doing that here, but we're not. Let's move on to the timeline tab. So as I said earlier, the timeline tab is like my absolute favorite tab. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to show you a couple other things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this little console button right here. Does everybody see where my mouse is? A little console on the right over there. I'm going to hit this and I'm going to go to the rendering tab right here. And I'm going to select Show Paint Rectangles. And what this will do is this will highlight in a bright green. You see the little scroll bar right there? Every time there's a paint going on. Right now, there's not a lot of paints because everything's kind of optimized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unoptimize everything. So I have backface visibility set on a number of stuff. So I'm going to do a new CSS property with the universal selector. I'm going to say backface visibility. Oh, shit. Let's try that again. I don't know what's going down. Here it is. Backface visibility. Visible, which is the default. And I'm going to say important. And I need to spell so it's important to spell visible properly. Am I spelling that right? All right, yeah. Sorry, guys. I had a long day. There we go. So right now, I took away all those layer promotion. And so as I scroll up and scroll down, you should be seeing more paintings right here. Let's see. As we get up, I'm kind of surprised it's not. So there's a little bit more paintings. I'm not quite sure what's going on. Oh, because we're still in the mobile mode. So I'm going to hit reload. So we're not, and then I'm going to have to reapply that. I was scared for a second. I was like, what I know is not working, right? So let's do it again. So I'm going to create a new selector with universal selector. I'm going to say backface visibility, visible, important. And now as I scroll up and down, you're going to see the whole page is highlighting green. So remember when I told you that like all of those parallax websites where they're struggling and janky and all that type of stuff? This is the type of stuff that you're going to see if you highlight that, if you show paint rectangles on those. So you can see that this is pretty bad. These are called paint storms, right? Because if your browser's painting something over here and then over here, it'll actually join those and paint one big rectangle as opposed to multiple rectangles. So let's go to the timeline tab. I'm going to hit the record button and I'm going to start scrolling. Well, actually, hold on, that's not fair. I'm gonna uncheck the show paint rectangles and then I'm going to do it. Check show paint rectangles. And now I'm going to record. So right now we have full page repaints going on. Everything's a little bit janky. And now I'm going to hit stop. And we're going to wait for this to retrieve events right here. And then we're going to dissect it a little bit. This is going to take probably about 20 seconds. Any questions while we're waiting?
Is this PowerPoint somewhere that you're giving the presentation?
Yeah, I have, like, the presentation part is on the Florida Drupal Camp website. It will be on this website, and it's being recorded, so all the good stuff. I don't think I've actually, like, ever recorded this session before, like all the Chrome DevTools stuff. So, all right. So the first thing that we see right here is this graph. So within the graph, you're going to see a couple different lines. You're going to see a 60 frame per second line and a 30 frame per second line. And you can see you typically want your animations to go at 60 frames per second. Honestly, this isn't like terribly as bad as I thought it was going to be. But what you can see in multiple places, it's getting almost to like 1 frame a second up there. It's looking pretty bad. And I can select some of this, drag this down, and I can kind of see what's going on right here. So remember what I was talking about earlier about like painting, compositing layers. You might be able to see some layout events in here. If we selected something, you will see layout events if we do this. We can uncheck scripting to get rid of those. I don't know what hit test is, but so you can see what's taken a long time. So yeah, so I can see right here, like this is taking a long time right here. I'm going to expand that. And let's take a look down here and see what's going on. See if it'll show me. Sometimes it'll give you a preview. I'm not quite sure why it will, and sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. Here it is. So you can see it's giving me an image right there, which is just a black box. But what it's looking at, it's repainting a black box that's 1264 by 8020. And what that is that's the entire web page right there. So it's repainting the entire web page as opposed to just that section. I'm going to go into some more stuff on the timeline tab, but let's go into the elements and uncheck that on optimization right here and kind of run everything again. So now I'm going to scroll down, going to scroll up, going to stop it. And we're going to see that things are going to be running a lot smoother, hopefully. If it doesn't like show us a lot smoother, I'm going to be like, what the hell? All right. All right, so look at this. Like, there's dramatically less grain going on because it's not doing all the painting. This is like freaking awesome to look at. Everything is pretty much under 60 right here, and it's looking good. So that's like a big difference. There's a couple other things that we can kind of look at while we're in here. You can get rid of that view, and you can get to this view. I don't even know what this view is called right here because it's kind of new. But it'll show various different potential bottlenecks and stuff with the little red ticks up here. You can see update layer tree down here. And sometimes you can actually click on stuff and track stuff down. So you can see my scroll event is being, well, it's pulling up jQuery. You can do flame charts, which is kind of cool. So flame charts will show you, especially if I reload right here, you're going to see a lot more. It'll show you your costly functions. So I'm just going to reload right here and just so I can kind of show. So when you're looking at flame charts, you're going to see like a whole bunch of functions on top of functions and all that type of stuff. And what's important to realize is it's not like the vertical height, it's the horizontal length of the function. You know, so you're going to see functions that call functions that do other stuff. And if it goes by very quickly, in the grand scheme of things, that might be okay. But if you see something going a very long time, that could potentially indicate a problem. So let's take a look at this in a second. And we're going to go over time. I'm going to try to be quick. But my computer's not cooperating. It's going so slow. 83, come on, 83. Yes! I'm getting silly. Any more questions while we're kind of sitting here waiting? Rendering, dev tools. Yeah.
My question.
Go ahead.
On that frame thing, is there a way you can save that as an animated GIF or something that you can use in presentation later?
I don't think so. I mean, you could obviously do a screen recording and change that to an animated GIF. But I don't think there's a straight export of it. Oh, gosh. This is killing me here. So let's think of other things. So I'm going to talk about stuff and then I'll show it to you. Question?
Yeah. Is there a good way to transfer the data that you're recording to a report to show the client as far as?
You can export the data as, I don't know what it's called, but like HAR files. I haven't done this before, so I don't, but if you Google it, like Google like export HAR file from DevTools, and then what you can do is you can reopen it up within DevTools and kind of explain that and access that data. Does that make sense? Yeah. So a couple other things I'm going to show that's on that same tab as the rendering tab. There's a couple different options. There's a frames per second meter, FPS meter. And so it'll put this little box in the top right, and it will actually show you your current frames per second, which is pretty useful as you're scrolling up and down and doing stuff. There's an option for for continuous page repaint. So continuous page repaint will continuously repaint your browser, which is of course a horrible idea except when you're troubleshooting. What's really useful for that, what that could be really useful for is if you're trying to figure out a faster way to do things. Like for example, inset box shadows can do very similar things as a linear gradient, but one of them is a lot faster to render. Linear gradients are faster to render, and you can troubleshoot that type of stuff by using the continuous page repaint, just by kind of selecting that, keeping an eye on it, and then messing around on your Elements tab within your CSS. That's kind of a useful thing. There's another option for show layer boundaries, which is kind of cool. So all the different layers that are moving around, it'll put an orange border around them, and it's just kind of useful for seeing how things move around, you know. And we'll select that in a second here, but we're almost done. Come on, it's the longest thing ever. I'm about to give up on this, honestly, because I don't want to, we have 3 minutes. Chrome. Let's go into some. So, what I was hoping to show you is within the flame charts, some of the various different options in there that I would. Anyway, whatever. Let me. So what I was gonna show you before, or now we're in. This is Canary, I think. I think it just updated. Like as I'm live, I think it just updated. So yeah, that's exactly what it was doing. So all right, so the rendering tab, show layer borders. We'll put that orange border around everything as you're starting to screw around. The FPS meter shows your current frames per second. Continuous page repainting is now gone. This stuff gets updated, I swear, on like a weekly basis. There used to be an option under here for continuous page repainting, so that's probably moved around. You have a layers tab right here that I was kind of doing a little bit earlier, where you can see how the layers move around. Anyway, I guess we're at like 5:20, so this is kind of it. But what I really want to kind of like get everybody to do is like understand how to troubleshoot these repainting issues, how to troubleshoot, how to use DevTools effectively to identify these performance issues, and not shoot themselves in the foot. You know, I've done a lot of things where I was shooting myself in the foot, where on every like page scroll event, I was doing calculations where I only had to do them once and I could have cached them. It took me a little bit of time to figure out the optimization. That's something that everybody needs to kind of look at. I shot myself in the foot one time where I was doing these animations on the section of the site that you're seeing right here, and so on every single scroll event, I'm moving stuff around, but I had a CSS transition set on this also. So the transition was trying to transition these little micro changes, which was slowing me down a whole bunch. That's something to keep in mind. But anyway, yeah, I guess I'll cut it off right now. But if you guys have any questions or anything else, yeah, just hit me up tonight. So thanks, everybody.